Greetings and welcome to what is World of Tanks. Short answer, it is an arcade-style tank game of 15 players versus 15 players where they battle over killing each other or capturing each other's base, or some derivative of that mode. Now, if this sounds a little interesting and fun to you, well, it is and it isn't, and I'll go into that once I start talking about everything else. But first, when you first start installing the game and when you first go in, you're going to notice that you only have very few and very weak tanks available. One of them being this thing. Now, looking at this thing, you're like, I don't want to play that. I want to play something big. I want to play something like the Tiger or the M4 Sherman or something like that. Now, unfortunately, that is one of the things that this game has for and against it. When you first log in and you can see your tier 1s, the tier 1s are what unlock the road to every single other tank of that nation in the game. As you can see, tanks are divided by nation and then later by type and so on and so forth. So when you first start up, you're going to have to decide what tanks you want to acquire and from what nation. And that seems like an extremely tall order, and it is. There are so many tanks in this game, and some of them are great, some of them are absolutely terrible. For example, where are you? For example, this thing is absolutely terrible. It is a heavy tank, but it has basically no armor to speak of, and is extremely slow, and yeah. However, there are other things that are extremely fun. For example, the AMX ELC Biz, which is this thing right here. Extremely small, but it's extremely fun to drive around. It's very good at scouting, but I digress. So, which tanks should you go for when you start playing? Now, I cannot answer that question for you because everybody prefers different things. The only thing I can tell you is that there are 3 very good tanks in the game that you can go for and you will not regret acquiring them. Those are, in the American branch, the T-29, this thing right here. Now, it looks rather impressive, and it is. However, the most important part of this tank is the turret armor. This thing is notorious for being impenetrable when hit from the front in its turret. So this thing is absolutely great for hiding behind little hills or debris and shooting at the enemy. Most of the time, they will have to aim at that little cupola right there to deal any type of damage. This is assuming you are not at the bottom of the tier list and you're up against, let's say, tier 8s and 9s. Now, in the German branch, we have the ever famous, the Tiger 2. Where is it? Here we go. The Tiger 2. Now, this thing is a very decent and very good tank. Now, as you can see, it does not have nowhere near the armor that the T-29 does. However, if we upgrade the turret, the armor goes up severely. And that's one of the things about World of Tanks. You need to research tanks in order to buy them, and then once you buy them, you need to research the stuff within that. Oh, here we go. And then you have stuff like this where your tracks are not powerful enough to carry the equipment you want. And yeah. So that is the progression system in the game. But anyway, this is the Tiger, and as you can see, it's very cool. It's very decent. It's got sloped armor. However, the hull down here is very relatively weak, and it's got a very big weak point right here. And that is that. And lastly, over here in the Russian branch, we have what is known as the... here we go. It is the IS-3. Now, this thing also has an extremely bouncy turret because of the angle that is in, but also this part right here will pretty much never get penetrated when it's shot from the front. In fact, I think this and its big brother, the IS something, although I think they changed its name to something else. Where is it? Anyway, as you can see, that thing had a very pikey nose, so that thing had a very high chance of bouncing shots when shot from the front. Anyway, those are the big 3 tanks in the game. They are very decent and very powerful, and you will enjoy playing them. However, getting to them is a completely different story. So, for example, here is my Tiger. Now, if I want to get the Tiger 2, I need 78,000 experience acquired in order to research it, which is what they call it. However, how much experience do you get per game? Now, if you have a pretty good game, like in this little screenshot I am showing you, you can get 1,000 or more experience, or I've even seen screenshots with people getting up towards 4,000. However, that's pretty much them killing 10 tanks of the opposing team and not dying. So usually, what you will get anywhere between 500 and 700 experience for your first victory of the day, and from there it will go down between 300 or 400 for victories, and anywhere between 50 and 150 for defeats. Now, that is not the only system in the game. As you can see right here, there is also what they call silver. Now, The bad part of that is that silver is used to repair your tank and resupply ammunition and consumables after every battle. So you have to deduce that from your score after a victory or defeat, and depending on your tier, you can end up actually coming out losing money in spite of everything. So that is one of the reasons why the tanks that people recommend most are tier 8s. Because tier 8 are pretty powerful and the matches last a decent amount, but they are not so expensive that their repair costs are going to drain all of your silver reward from that battle. That's going to happen between tier 9 and 10. If you absolutely get destroyed and don't do anything particularly useful, you can end up with like 150,000 silver down the drain. And that is, I might have exaggerated there, but that's pretty much how it goes. So now that that is out of the way, oh, and if you want to look up any other tank, I recommend the World of Tanks wiki. They have the list of all the tanks there, and that's a pretty good place to start. So, onto the tanks. Let's start with light tanks. So, light tanks are the literally best scouts in the game. They have the fastest mobility, the lowest profile, highest camouflage values, as in if they sit still, they are harder to spot. And some of them even have very decent weapons. For example, the AMX that you're seeing right here has a decent gun, even if its turret can only rotate about 90 degrees in front of it. Now, there are two ways to play a light tank. Well, three ways technically. First is scouting. You can either passive scout or active scout. That is passive, you sit in the bush, you spot enemies for your team and let them do the killing until you get spotted by an enemy, in which case you then run away. Then there is active scouting, which is you run around the map, peeking over hills and spotting people and staying mobile so you don't get shot by anything. Depending on the map is basically which way you're going to scout, and also your knowledge of the map is going to vary greatly, and because of that is going to vary which type of scouting you do. And lastly, there is going artillery hunting. Now this is extremely dangerous to do at the very beginning of a battle. Usually you want to wait till there's a few enemies left, and they're usually and that they've progressed through the map all the way through the middle, or so you can sneak past them, get to their artillery and take it out. So that is generally the main job of the light tanks. Now, medium tanks. Medium tanks are a little complex to play, if we're honest. That is because they are nowhere near as fast or agile or have the view range of the light tanks, and they have nowhere near the powerful guns or the armor of the heavy tanks. So what are they good for? They are what is called the most versatile tank because depending on where they are on the list are the things that they can accomplish and do. So if you're near the top of the list, you can usually act as a semi-heavy tank in that you can go along with your heavy tanks and push forward. Or if you're near the bottom of the list, you want to stay back and you want to shoot people from afar. Now in this video, I come around here escorting our couple of heavy tanks that came in this direction, and because I am here to help them, I stopped these two light tanks from flanking them and tracking them and being a whole lot of annoying to them, and that got me a victory and some nice crits at the end. Now, heavy tanks, these are the epitome of what you think a tank is. Now, these are designed to go towards the enemy, punch a hole through their forces, and deal damage. However, that is not completely true because depending on what tank you are driving, what you are facing up against, and what map you are on is going to dictate where you go and how you play. Now, you usually have the fantasy of being in the tank and rolling forward and being unstoppable. Unfortunately, you are not unstoppable. Even the heaviest of tanks can be taken down by medium and light tanks of its tier if it gets left out in the open. So you want to progress slowly through the map, taking sector after sector, picking around corners, dealing damage, and staying with your team and other heavy tanks so that you can punch through the enemy's forces. Now, if you happen to land between the mid-tier of your team or lower, then you want to switch your role to being a slow medium tank, because your armor is not going to be of use to anybody because everybody on their team is going to be able to penetrate your armor, and that's just how things go. Now, tank destroyers. This is something very interesting in the game because there are two completely different ways of playing a tank destroyer, and that is going to vary depending on what tank destroyer you are playing. If you have something extremely like my little school bus here, then you want to find a nice faraway spot to hide in, take pot shots at the enemy, make sure you don't get killed, and help out your team that is pushing somewhere around the map. Now, if you are using something extremely heavy and very well armored, like say a Ferdinand or a Jagged Tiger, let's go with the Ferdinand here, which is a premium vehicle. Now, this thing has a lot of armor on the front. So if you were in this thing, you want to be with your heavy tanks helping them push. You don't want to be at the front. You want to be behind your heavy tanks dealing suppressive fire to the enemy. But that is the two different ways that you can play a tank destroyer depending on what tank destroyer you are going with. Now, artillery is a very different way of playing the game. That is because instead of zooming in when you press shift, you get a bird's eye view of the battlefield. And that little green line you see is how far your shot will go. Then you have that little circle of green dots that will tell you the area that your shots can land in, and in general, it is very, very large, so you need to wait a long time for it to close in and be relatively accurate. However, if you move your turret, well, your tank at all, as in move it from left to right as in its chassis, the circle will expand drastically. So that is one of the things that artillery have going against it. That is very slow load time. The dispersion of movement is massive, and it is generally very inaccurate to fire unless your circle is relatively small. Now, if you are getting rushed by medium tanks, you can't act as a, let's say, shotgun-ish tank. However, if this happens, you are only going to get one shot at them, so it's usually not recommended, and usually if it comes to that, you're usually going to be dead. Well, you're going to be dead. You're going to die, and you're going to be dead. So those are all of the 5 different types of vehicles in the game. So with all that said and done, how should you play the game and how does it play? Well, once you learn the basics of the game and how to play the tank that you've chosen and the one you have available to you, the game can actually be very fun. I have a lot of fun driving around in the AMX, well, in this little tiny little bugger here. He is very difficult to hit and has very high camouflage values, so I can sit in bushes and spot enemies from my team and get lots of credits that way. I also like the Panzer IV here. It's not the best at anything, but it can do the job when the job needs to be done. So with all that, is it a good game? The technical answer is yes, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It comes down to taste. If the grind seems like it is a lot of grinding to do, that's because once you get past level 5, it definitely will feel like it is a lot of grinding to do. Because not only do you have to grind your experience to research a tank, you also need to grind the money to research, well, to buy it. As you can see, even if I research it, once I research this, I need 935,000 silver to get it. And depending on how much silver you are able to get from a single game, I believe it's anywhere between 15 and 50,000 silver for average. That is excluding any supremely skilled games that you happen to have every single kill or something like that. It's going to take quite a long time to get the silver you need to buy the tank you have now researched. And aside from that, there is also crew training that you need to take into consideration. Now, one of the things I do recommend is that once you buy the next tank, if you have no attachment to the previous tank that you were researching it from, is that you transfer the crew from that tank to the next one. Now, they will take a penalty to experience, so let's see. Where are you? And I'm looking for something. Here we go. I think these guys know. Where are you? I know I am researching a tank here. Well, anyway. First, they need to get to 100% of their qualifications. This means that the commander is going to increase his spotting range, the gunner is going to reload, is going to aim faster, and so on and so forth. And after that, every single one of these guys can learn 4 different abilities. So if we go over here, you can see that it can learn any of these. Now, you can only start learning these once that person has reached 100% training. And so if you transfer the crew from one tank to another, like I recommend, it's going to take a little bit less time than if you were training a brand new crew. And this can make it a whole lot easier so that once you get the tank you want, you can actually be effective in it. Now, when you transfer them, they do take a penalty to their experience. So you'll have to play a little bit before they start racking up the experience from where they were. But it's definitely a good strategy to avoid, well, having to buy crew after crew after crew, and so on and so forth. Now, aside from that, there is also the researching of various parts for every tank. So every tank has things that need to be researched from it, except for tier 10s, which are automatically fully researched, except for a couple outliers in the example. But anyway, as you can see here, I had to research a whole lot more before I can even consider gathering enough experience for the mouse. And that is one of the things that really puts people off from this game. Is what puts me off every so often, in that I really want to play the mouse, but it is basically a near impossibility for somebody that does not have a VIP account and dedicates a lot of hours to playing the game. So if you were hoping to get all the way to tier 10 quickly and have a lot of fun blowing people up, it's going to be a very long time before you can do that, unfortunately. So now with all that out of the way, what is the game fun? It can be. It can also be very frustrating depending if you're up against, let's say, I don't know, a lot of friends that are gathering together and playing. Now, there is a limit to how big the party they can make. I believe the maximum is 4. But it also can be extremely fun if you are landing a whole lot of artillery shots, if you're blowing up light tanks with your big howitzer gun like I've been able to do sometimes, or if you're having a lot of fun being a nuisance or your hidden tank destroyer somewhere on the map. And it can also be extremely frustrating. But yeah, that is World of Tanks. Oh, and by the way, the sound design that they have added to this game with the most recent patch is absolutely awesome. The way the guns sound, the way the bullets sound when they bounce off the armor, it's absolutely beautiful. The way the engines sound when they're different, it really does sound great. Graphics are middle of the road, but that is World of Tanks. Hopefully you find this useful, and I will see you next time.